I never thought I'd have to fight for my own home, especially not against my own sister. But life has a way of throwing the most unexpected challenges at you when you least expect them. The day had begun like any other Thursday, the morning sun, streaming through the kitchen windows of my cherished Victorian home as I sipped my coffee, contemplating the stack of student essays I needed to grade before the weekend. Teaching high school English had its challenges, but I'd found a comfortable rhythm in my life. My home, with its creaking hardwood floors and crown molding that whispered stories of bygone eras, was my sanctuary, my inheritance from Grandma, Eleanor, who had always understood me in ways no one else seemed to. Then my phone rang. "Honey, it's Mom," came the familiar voice, tinged with an unmistakable note of apprehension that immediately set my nerves on edge. "I have some news." I braced myself, fingers tightening around my ceramic mug. "What's going on?" "It's about Amber," she said, referring to my younger sister. "She and Derek are back from Arizona." The simple statement sent a jolt through my system. Amber and I had never been close, like fire and ice from the day she was born. Me, the responsible, studious, older sister. Her, the impulsive, charming whirlwind who sailed through life expecting others to clean up her messes. "What happened to their big desert dreams?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Just 6 months ago, Amber had declared with her typical dramatic flair that Arizona was calling to her soul, and that she and Derek simply had to answer. They'd sold nearly everything and moved across the country, burning bridges with landlords and employers alike. Mom's sigh carried the weight of years dealing with Amber's impulsive decisions. "The company Derek was working for went under. They're staying with me for now, but my place is so small, and with my arthritis acting up." The unspoken request hung in the air between us. I closed my eyes, already knowing where this conversation was heading. "Mom, I don't think—" "Just for a little while, Ellie," she pleaded, using my childhood nickname, a tactic she reserved for when she really wanted something from me. "They're family, and you have all that space in that big house of yours." "It's not that big," I protested weakly, looking around at my modest 3-bedroom home. Yes, I lived alone, but each room had its purpose. My office, my reading room, my bedroom, my carefully curated spaces that represented the quiet, orderly life I'd built for myself. "They won't be any trouble," Mom promised, in the same tone she'd used when convincing me to let 8-year-old Amber tag along to my high school friend's movie night, which had ended with spilled soda and tears. "They just need a place to land while they figure things out." The silence stretched between us as I fought an internal battle. Part of being the responsible one in the family meant making these sacrifices, didn't it? Yet memories of past encounters with Hurricane Amber flashed through my mind. Borrowed clothes never returned, broken promises, the casual way she'd dismiss my boundaries as being uptight. "How long?" I finally asked, already regretting the question. "A month, maybe 2, at most," Mom said quickly, relief evident in her voice. "Just until they find jobs and get back on their feet." I sighed deeply, staring at my reflection in the dark surface of my coffee. "Fine, but there have to be rules, Mom, real ones, and I need your support in enforcing them." "Of course, honey," she said, though we both knew that when it came to Amber, rules had always been more like gentle suggestions in our family. "Thank you. You're such a good sister." Was I? Or was I just a pushover? The question lingered as I hung up the phone and gazed around my peaceful home, wondering how long it would remain that way. Little did I know then that I wasn't just opening my door to my sister and her husband. I was inviting in a storm that would test my patience, my resolve, and ultimately my sense of self-worth in ways I could never have imagined. They arrived on Saturday morning in a rental truck, packed with far more possessions than people who had supposedly sold everything should have had. I stood on my front porch, arms crossed against the autumn chill, and perhaps against what was coming, as Derek maneuvered the unwieldy vehicle into my driveway, narrowly missing my carefully tended hydrangea bushes. Amber bounded out of the passenger side before the truck had fully stopped, her honey blonde hair, dyed to match the desert sun, she'd tell anyone who would listen, bouncing around her shoulders. At 32, 3 years my junior, she still possessed the effortless beauty and energy that had always made her the center of attention in any room. "Ellie!" she squealed, rushing toward me with outstretched arms as if we were long-lost friends, rather than sisters who'd exchanged nothing but terse text messages for months. "Oh my God, it's so good to see you!" I accepted her hug stiffly, inhaling the cloud of expensive perfume that surrounded her. How someone who was supposedly broke could afford Chanel No. 5 remained one of life's enduring mysteries. "Hi, Amber," I said, pulling back to look at her. Despite everything, a small part of me was genuinely glad to see she was okay. "You look well." "Arizona was amazing for my skin," she gushed, touching her face. "The dry heat, you know, but I missed real seasons. And family." She glanced back at Derek, who was struggling with a large cardboard box. "Honey, be careful with that one. It has all my shoes." Derek, a tall man with perpetually rumpled brown hair and kind eyes that seemed permanently shadowed with worry, nodded obediently. I'd always thought he deserved better than the chaos my sister dragged him through, but after 7 years of marriage, he appeared resigned to his role as Amber's steadfast accomplice. "Hey, Eleanor," he called, managing a genuine smile despite the weight in his arms. "Thanks for this. Seriously, it means a lot." I nodded, warming slightly at his sincere gratitude. "Let me help you unload." "Oh, you're the best," Amber exclaimed, already breezing past me into the house. "I was thinking we could take the east bedroom, the one with the bay window. It gets such gorgeous morning light." I froze halfway down the porch steps. The east bedroom was my reading room, filled with bookshelves I'd built myself, and the antique reading chair that had been Grandma Eleanor's favorite. It was where I spent every Sunday morning with coffee and a novel, watching the sun rise through that very bay window. "Actually," I said, following her inside, "I've set up the guest room for you. It has a queen bed and its own bathroom." Amber's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "Oh, but it's so small, and with all our things. Plus, that room faces the street and you know I'm a light sleeper." "It's the guest room or Mom's couch," I said firmly, surprising myself with my resolve. "Your choice." A flash of something, annoyance perhaps or calculation, crossed her face before she laughed lightly. "The guest room will be perfect. I was just thinking out loud. You know me, always dreaming big." I did know her. That was precisely the problem. The next few hours passed in a flurry of activity as Derek made trip after trip from the truck to the house, while Amber flitted about, ostensibly directing where things should go, but mostly reminiscing about pieces of furniture and decor, as if narrating a museum tour of her life. "This coffee table we found at this adorable little artisan market in Sedona. The energy there is just incredible, Ellie. You can feel it in the wood." By late afternoon, when the truck was finally empty and Derek looked ready to collapse, I called for a break. We sat around my kitchen table, the one place that still felt fully mine, with glasses of iced tea. "So," I began, determined to establish some parameters before things went any further. "I've written up a few house rules." I slid a piece of paper across the table. "Nothing major, just some guidelines to make sure we all get along while you're here." Amber glanced at the paper without picking it up. "Rules? Ellie, we're not teenagers." "I know that," I said evenly. "Which is why I expect you'll have no problem with basic courtesy like cleaning up after yourselves, respecting quiet hours during the work week, and contributing to household expenses." Derek leaned forward to read the list, nodding. "This all seems reasonable. We really appreciate you taking us in, Eleanor. We'll do our part." Amber rolled her eyes but smiled sweetly. "Of course we will. Mi casa es su casa, right? Or I guess it's su casa es mi casa in this case." She laughed at her own joke. Something about her phrasing made me uneasy, but I dismissed it as typical Amber bravado. "I've cleared some space in the pantry and fridge for your food," I continued. "We can take turns cooking or do our own thing, whatever." "Works! Oh, I'll cook," Amber said enthusiastically. "You've always been so busy with work. Let me take care of the domestic stuff. It's the least I can do." I blinked in surprise. Amber had never shown interest in cooking before. Her culinary repertoire had always been limited to microwave meals and takeout orders. But people changed, didn't they? Maybe the Arizona experience had matured her in ways I hadn't given her credit for. "That's thoughtful," I said cautiously. "Thank you." "It's settled then," she declared, clapping her hands together. "This is going to be so great, Ellie, like when we were kids, but better because we're all grown up now. No more fighting over toys or bathroom time." I forced a smile, wanting to believe her, but unable to shake the suspicion that this enthusiastic, accommodating version of my sister was too good to be true. Experience had taught me that Amber's generosity usually came with strings attached. Strings that inevitably became tangled in knots only I was expected to untie. "Right," I said, standing up to clear our glasses. "Well, I'll let you two get settled in. I need to finish grading some papers tonight." "Always the teacher," Amber teased, though her tone held a hint of something that might have been resentment. "Don't work too hard, sis." As I retreated to my office, thankfully on the opposite side of the house from their room, I tried to silence the alarm bells ringing faintly in the back of my mind. It was just for a month or two, I reminded myself. How bad could it really be? The answer, as it turned out, was worse than I could have possibly imagined. The first week passed in a blur of adjustments and compromises. I found myself waking up earlier to avoid the morning bathroom rush, eating lunch at school instead of coming home to enjoy my midday break in peace, and staying late in my office to grade papers rather than doing it at my kitchen table as usual. Small changes, I told myself. Temporary accommodations. Amber, true to her word, did attempt cooking once. The resulting chaos of smoke alarms, spattered grease, and a kitchen that looked like a crime scene quickly ended that particular contribution to household management. After that, she pivoted to claiming she'd organize the house, while Derek and I were at work. He'd found a temporary position at a local warehouse within days, much to my relief. What organizing meant to Amber, I discovered, was rearranging my possessions according to her aesthetic sensibilities, resulting in misplaced items and the unsettling feeling that my home was slowly being colonized. My favorite reading lamp now resided in their bedroom because it matched the curtains better. My carefully curated shelf of framed photos had been updated with pictures of her and Derek prominently displayed front and center. Each evening, when I returned from work, something else would be different. Subtle changes that individually seemed petty to complain about, but collectively created the distinct impression that I was becoming a guest in my own home. By Friday night, I needed space. I sequestered myself in my office with a glass of wine and a new mystery novel, determined to reclaim at least a few hours of solitude. I was 2 chapters in when a knock at the door interrupted my hard-won peace. "Come in," I called, trying not to sound as irritated as I felt. The door opened to reveal Derek, looking uncomfortable. "Hey, Eleanor, sorry to bother you." I closed my book, noting his nervous expression. "What's up?" He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Amber wanted me to let you know that we're having some people over tomorrow night. Just a small get-together with a few friends we've reconnected with." My eyebrows shot up involuntarily. "Tomorrow, in my house." "I told her we should check with you first," he said quickly, confirming my suspicion that he was the messenger, not the architect of this plan. "But she's already invited everyone, and she said you wouldn't mind because it's Saturday and you don't have work." The presumption was so typically Amber that I almost laughed. "How many is a few friends, Derek?" He winced slightly. "Maybe 10? Plus us." 12 people, in my house, with less than 24 hours' notice. I set my wine glass down carefully, reminding myself that Derek wasn't the enemy here. And I suppose Amber is planning to cook and clean for this party? His grimace told me everything I needed to know. I sighed deeply. Tell her that if she wants to have friends over, she needs to handle all the preparations and cleaning up afterward. And everyone needs to be gone by midnight. I have church on Sunday morning. Relief washed over his face. That's more than fair. Thanks, Eleanor. I'll make sure everything gets cleaned up, even if I have to do it myself. I nodded, appreciating his sincerity, if not his spine, when it came to standing up to my sister. As he turned to leave, a question occurred to me. Derek, what happened in Arizona? Really? He paused, his hand on the doorknob, not turning to face me. It's complicated. The job didn't work out like your mom said. And? I pressed, sensing there was more to the story. His shoulders sagged slightly. And we may have had some issues with our apartment complex, a misunderstanding about the terms of our lease. Translation: they'd been evicted. It wasn't the first time Amber's misunderstandings had left them scrambling for housing. I see, I said, not pushing further. Good night, Derek. Night, Eleanor, and thanks for everything. After he left, I tried to return to my book, but the words swam before my eyes as anxiety about the impending small get-together took root. I knew from experience that Amber's idea of small gatherings usually involved loud music, louder laughter, and the distinct possibility of something expensive getting broken. Sure enough, Saturday night brought a parade of strangers into my home, each bearing bottles of alcohol and overly familiar hugs for someone they'd just met. Amber flitted about in a dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, playing the consummate hostess as if the house were hers. And this is the formal dining room, I overheard her saying to a couple I didn't recognize, her voice carrying the proprietary tone of someone showing off her own home. The chandelier is original to the house. I've been thinking of updating it with something more modern, but there's something charming about keeping these vintage touches, don't you think? I nearly choked on my drink. The chandelier had been one of Grandma Eleanor's prized possessions, a delicate crystal piece she'd inherited from her own mother. The thought of Amber replacing it with whatever trendy monstrosity caught her eye made my blood run cold. I was about to interject when one of the guests, a balding man with an unfortunate penchant for cologne, asked, "So how long have you owned this place? It's gorgeous." Before I could step forward and correct the misperception, Amber laughed lightly. "Oh, it feels like forever. It's been in the family for generations. We're very attached to it." The casual way she sidestepped the truth without technically lying left me momentarily speechless. It was classic Amber, creating whatever narrative suited her purposes while maintaining plausible deniability. I retreated to the kitchen, needing a moment to compose myself. Derek was there, diligently refilling a chip bowl. "Your wife is telling people she owns my house," I said without preamble, keeping my voice low despite my anger. He looked genuinely startled. "What?" "No, she wouldn't. She just did." I heard her. I crossed my arms, daring him to defend her. Derek ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as his stress response. "She's probably just excited to have people over. You know how she gets carried away sometimes." "This isn't getting carried away, Derek. This is lying. In my home, to people I've never met." He nodded, his expression pained. "You're right. I'll talk to her." "See that you do," I said firmly, grabbing a glass of water and retreating to my office, which I'd pointedly locked earlier to prevent it from becoming part of the house tour. As promised, the party did wind down around midnight, though the cleanup Derek had vowed to handle was still very much in progress when I left for church the next morning. I returned to find most of the visible mess gone, but the distinct feeling that corners had been cut, a sentiment confirmed when I discovered sticky residue on my coffee table and a wine stain on one of the couch cushions that had been flipped over in an attempt to hide the evidence. The next week brought a new development. Amber began inviting her friends over during the day, while Derek and I were at work. I'd come home to find unfamiliar coffee mugs in the sink, cushions out of place, and once, the distinct odor of cigarette smoke lingering in the guest bathroom despite my strict no-smoking policy. When confronted, Amber was all wide-eyed innocence. "They're just a few girlfriends from high school, Ellie. We're networking. Marissa's husband works at that big tech company downtown and might have a lead for me. Isn't that what you want? For us to find jobs and get back on our feet?" It was difficult to argue with her stated intentions, manipulative though her execution might be. So I swallowed my frustration and reminded myself again, temporary. This was all temporary. But as 1 month stretched into 2 with no sign of Amber, and Derek making concrete plans to move out, my patience began to wear dangerously thin. The final straw came on a Wednesday evening in late October, when I arrived home from parent-teacher conferences, exhausted from hours of diplomatic conversations about underperforming students, to find not only Amber and Derek in my living room but also an older couple I'd never seen before. "There she is," Amber exclaimed, rising from the sofa with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ellie, come meet Derek's parents. They're visiting from Chicago and simply had to see the house." I stood frozen in the entryway, still clutching my bag of ungraded papers as 4 expectant faces turned toward me. Derek looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole, which told me everything I needed to know about whether this visit had been planned with my knowledge. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington," I managed, setting down my bag and summoning every ounce of the polite professionalism I used with particularly difficult parents at school. What a surprise! Mrs. Harrington, a petite woman with carefully styled silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing, stepped forward to grasp my hand. "Please call me Margaret, and this is Robert. We've heard so much about you from Amber." I very much doubted that, considering Amber and I had barely spoken in the weeks they'd been staying with me, but I smiled thinly. "How nice. I wasn't aware you were visiting. How long are you in town?" "Just a few days," Robert said, a tall man with Derek's same kind eyes and resigned expression. "We're staying at the Holiday Inn downtown." At least there was that small mercy. They weren't expecting to stay here too. "Margaret and Robert arrived this afternoon," Amber explained, looping her arm through mine as if we were the closest of sisters. "I was just about to give them the grand tour. You don't mind, do you? I know how proud you are of all the work you've done on the place." The work I'd done? As if Amber had any idea about the weekends I'd spent stripping old wallpaper, the hours researching period-appropriate paint colors, or the savings I'd invested in restoring the original hardwood floors. "Actually," I said, extracting my arm from her grip, "I'm quite tired. Parent-teacher night, you know. Perhaps the tour could wait until tomorrow." "Nonsense," Amber declared with a tinkling laugh. "It won't take long, and the light is so perfect right now. You can join us, or if you're really that tired, maybe grab a quick shower. You look a bit frazzled." She reached up to smooth my hair in a gesture that managed to be both condescending and territorial at once. I stepped back, my patience snapping like a dry twig. "Amber, may I speak with you privately for a moment? In the kitchen." Her smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Sure thing, sis. Robert, Margaret, why don't you look at those lovely original crown moldings while I chat with Ellie? We'll be right back." Once in the kitchen, I rounded on her, keeping my voice low, but making no attempt to hide my anger. "What do you think you're doing?" Amber's innocent act dropped immediately, her expression hardening. "Being a good daughter-in-law and showing Derek's parents where we're living. What's the big deal?" "The big deal is that you invited people to my home without asking me first. Again. And you're giving tours as if you own the place, which, need I remind you, you don't." She rolled her eyes, leaning against the counter with casual disregard for my anger. "You're being so dramatic. They're Derek's parents, not strangers off the street. And they're only here for a little while. That's not the point, and you know it." I crossed my arms, refusing to let her deflect. You've been acting like this is your house since the day you arrived, moving my things, inviting your friends over whenever you want, and now I come home to find unexpected guests waiting for me? It stops now, Amber." A calculated look crossed her face, one I recognized from countless childhood confrontations, the expression she wore when deciding whether to fight back or play victim. Today, she apparently chose the latter. "I'm just trying to make the best of a difficult situation," she said, her voice taking on a quavering quality that might have fooled someone who hadn't known her all her life. "Derek's parents worry about us, and I wanted to show them that we're okay, that we have a nice place to stay until we get back on our feet. Is that so terrible?" "No. What's terrible is your complete disregard for boundaries and common courtesy," I retorted, unmoved by her performance. "If you want to show your in-laws where you're staying, fine. But you ask me first, and you make it clear to them that this is my house where you are temporary guests." Her facade cracked slightly, a flash of real anger showing through. "God, you've always been like this, so rigid, so obsessed with your precious boundaries. It's a house, Ellie, bricks and wood and plaster. Why do you have to make everything so difficult? It's not just a house to me, Amber. It's my home. Something you've never respected," she scoffed. "Respected? You got this place handed to you on a silver platter. Grandma's favorite, with her precious Victorian and her college fund, while the rest of us had to figure it out for ourselves." The unfairness of her accusation struck me like a physical blow. Yes, Grandma Eleanor had left me her house after I'd spent every weekend of my college years helping her maintain it, keeping her company when her arthritis got too bad for her. To manage alone, reading to her when her eyesight began to fail. Amber, meanwhile, had visited perhaps twice a year, usually when she needed money or a place to crash between apartments. "That's not what happened, and you know it," I said quietly, my anger cooling into something harder and more resolute. "But I'm not having this argument with you right now. Your in-laws are waiting, and I'm going to my room to change. When I come back down, I expect you to have made it clear to them whose house this actually is." I turned to leave, but her next word stopped me cold. "They think we're buying it from you." I slowly turned back. "What?" Amber at least had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Derek's parents. They think we're in the process of buying the house from you. That's why we're staying here, to transition into ownership." For a moment, I was too stunned to speak. "And why?" I finally managed. "Would they think that?" She shrugged, examining her manicured nails. "They were worried about us after the Arizona thing. Derek didn't want them to know we were basically homeless, so he told them we had a plan. That we'd been talking with you about taking over Grandma's house since you were thinking of moving closer to your school anyway." The audacity, the sheer breathtaking audacity, left me momentarily speechless. "You let them believe, no, you actively led them to believe, that you're buying my home from me? A home I have no intention of selling? A home that, need I remind you, you're only staying in temporarily as a favor?" "It was just to give them peace of mind," Amber protested. "And it's not like it couldn't happen eventually. This place is way too big for just you, and family should help family, right? That's what Mom always says." I stared at her, truly seeing her for perhaps the first time in our adult lives. This wasn't just Amber being Amber, impulsive, self-centered, living in the moment. This was calculated. She had orchestrated this entire situation, from the initial plea to stay just for a month or two to the gradual colonization of my space, all building to this moment where I was supposed to feel cornered into actually selling her my beloved home. "Get them out," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Get your in-laws out of my house right now." "Don't be ridiculous," she hissed, glancing toward the living room. "We can't just—" "You can, and you will. Make up whatever excuse you need to, but they are not staying another minute, and neither are you once they're gone." Her eyes widened in genuine alarm. "Ellie, be reasonable. You have until tomorrow evening to pack your things and find somewhere. else to stay, I continued, a cold, clear certainty settling over me. I don't care if it's Mom's couch or a hotel or a cardboard box under a bridge. You are no longer welcome in my home. You can't do that, she sputtered, her voice rising. We have nowhere else to go. And what about family loyalty? What would Grandma say if she knew you were throwing your own sister out on the street? The mention of our grandmother only crystallized my resolve. Grandma Eleanor valued honesty and respect above all else, which are two qualities you've demonstrated exactly none of. She'd be appalled by what you've done here. Before Amber could respond, the kitchen door swung open to reveal Derek, his expression a mix of concern and resignation. Everything okay in here? The parents are wondering about that tour. I turned to him, my anger finding a new target. Did you know about this, Derek? About the lie you've been telling your parents? He had the decency to look ashamed. Eleanor, it's complicated. It's really not, I cut in. Either you knew and were complicit, or you were too weak to stand up to your wife's manipulation. Neither option reflects well on you. His shoulders slumped in defeat, confirming what I'd suspected. He'd known all along. What do you want us to do? He asked quietly. I want you to tell your parents the truth, and then I want you both out of my house by tomorrow evening. That's non-negotiable. Amber, recovering from her initial shock, crossed her arms defiantly. And if we refuse, it would take months to legally evict us, and you know it. We could make things very difficult for you, Ellie. The threat, for that's what it was, hung in the air between us. She was right about the legal complications of removing unwanted tenants, even those without a formal lease. But she'd underestimated my determination. Then I'll call the police and report that strangers have broken into my home and are refusing to leave, I said evenly. I have the deed in my name and plenty of documentation to prove ownership. You have nothing but a story you made up to impress your in-laws. Which of us do you think they'll believe? The bluff worked. I saw the calculation in her eyes as she weighed her options and found them wanting. For all her bravado, Amber had always backed down when faced with real consequences. Fine, she snapped. But don't expect Mom to take your side on this, and don't come crying to me when you realize how lonely you are in this big old house all by yourself. I almost laughed at the transparent attempt to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. I'd rather be alone in my home than surrounded by people who don't respect me or my boundaries. Now go deal with your in-laws. I'll be in my room until they're gone. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of Derek's face, a mixture of shame, relief, and something that might have been admiration. It struck me then that perhaps his life with Amber was its own kind of prison, constructed of lies and impossible expectations that he'd never managed to break free from. For a brief moment, I felt sorry for him, but not sorry enough to change my mind. The aftermath of my confrontation with Amber played out exactly as I'd expected. A blur of tearful phone calls from my mother, passive-aggressive text messages from my sister, and the quiet, efficient packing of Derek, who seemed resigned to the consequences of their actions. She really thought you'd give in, he confided, as he loaded the last of their boxes into a rental car the next evening. Amber was at our mother's house, having decided that a dramatic exit was better than facing me directly. That you'd feel too guilty to follow through. She doesn't know me very well then, I said, standing on my porch with arms crossed against the chill air, and perhaps against the lingering doubt that whispered I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. Derek paused, keys in hand. For what it's worth, I am sorry. About all of it. Arizona, the lies, the way she treated your home. I studied him, this man who had hitched his wagon to my sister's chaotic star and seemed perpetually caught in her gravitational pull. Why do you stay with her, Derek? After everything? A sad smile crossed his face. Because behind all that, he gestured vaguely, encompassing the disaster that was Amber's approach to life. There's someone who's scared and trying her best, even if her best is, well, this. I wasn't so sure, but it wasn't my place to convince him otherwise. I hope you find some stability. both of you." He nodded, then hesitated before asking, "What did you tell your mom? About why we're leaving?" "The truth," I said simply, though whether she believes me over Amber's version is another matter entirely. "And her in-laws?" "That they should talk to their son if they want to know the real story," I replied. "The rest is up to you," he nodded again, looking relieved and terrified in equal measure. "Goodbye, Eleanor, and thanks for everything before this mess. You were always good to us, even when we didn't deserve it." As I watched him drive away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that my home was mine again, sadness for the broken relationship with my sister, and a quiet determination that I would never again allow anyone to take advantage of my generosity or make me feel like a guest in my own life. I walked back inside, closing the door firmly behind me. The house felt different somehow, quieter, certainly, but also as if it had weathered a storm and emerged stronger for it. I moved through the rooms, straightening a picture here, reclaiming a displaced lamp there, erasing the evidence of Amber and Derek's brief residency. In the kitchen, I found a note propped against the coffee maker, Derek's handwriting, not Amber's. "The couch cushion with the wine stain has been professionally cleaned. It's drying in the garage. Sorry again for everything." A small gesture, but one that spoke volumes about the difference between the two of them. I folded the note and tucked it into a drawer, not quite ready to discard this final evidence of their stay. That night, I sat in Grandma Eleanor's reading chair by the bay window, a cup of tea in hand, watching the stars emerge in the clear autumn sky. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace in my own space. "I did the right thing," I said aloud to the empty room, perhaps addressing my grandmother's spirit, or perhaps just needing to hear the words confirmed in my own voice. The old house creaked in response, settling into its foundations as it had for over a century. It wasn't agreement exactly, but it felt like understanding. Family was important, that much my mother had always been right about. But somewhere along the way, I'd allowed family loyalty to become a one-way street, where my needs and boundaries were perpetually sacrificed on the altar of keeping the peace with Amber. No more. I had finally learned what Grandma Eleanor had tried to teach me all those years ago, that true love, whether for family or friends, required respect on both sides. Without it, the relationship became a slow poison, corroding the very foundation it claimed to support. As I drifted off to sleep that night in my reclaimed sanctuary, I made a promise to myself and to the memory of the strong woman who had entrusted me with her beloved home. I would never again mistake enabling for support or sacrifice for love. House remained what Grandma had always intended it to be, not just walls and a roof, but a physical manifestation of independence, of self-worth, of the right to create boundaries and have them respected. It was my sanctuary, my legacy, and my home. And that, I realized as I drifted off to sleep, was something worth fighting for.